Hey there, friend. Welcome back to another episode of the By Word Show. We are on week 10 of the Love is Many series. And I just got to say, first of all, I missed you guys last week. I was on a trip, but I'm so glad to be back with you today. I hope that you were able to enjoy the little week off, maybe use it as a catch up week, because this week we are talking about how love never gives up. Other translations say love bears all things or always protects. And I'm excited about this one. Actually, when I was studying for this one yesterday, I learned a lot. I really feel like I got a new perspective on this one. So hopefully it's encouraging to you as well. When I looked up this verse on Blue Letter Bible, I found out that this word bear, like to bear all things, means to protect or keep by covering or to preserve. And then I thought this was really interesting. There's a quote that was on Blue Letter Bible from Thayer's Greek lexicon. And it says 1 Corinthians 13:7 is explained by some, love covers. It hides and excuses the errors and faults of others, but it's more appropriately rendered with other interpreters, bears. For the word used here, which is the Greek word, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but it means by covering to keep off something which threatens, or to bear up against, hold out against, and so to endure, to bear, and forbear. And so it's almost like this protector, like this covering that preserves and keeps safe, something of value, like to fend off threats. Like, I just thought that was a really interesting picture of the word we're talking about here, because when I think about never giving up, I'm just like, all right, persevere, push through. Like, that's normally what I think of when I think about bearing all things, but the fact that some of these translations say love protects, I was like, okay, that's interesting. So let's dive into that today. Something I wrote in my journal a couple years ago for this one is that when I think about this idea of love bearing all things, it reminds me of this idea of carrying or supporting. So why is this important to love? Well, I think it's important because love lifts the load. It makes me think of Matthew 11:28-30. I'm sure you've heard it. I love how it's said in the Message translation. So I'm just going to read it for you really quick because I think it's super beautiful. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. I love that so much. I could just sit here and soak in that. It's so beautiful. Like learning the unforced rhythms of grace. The fact that Jesus won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on us. Like that to me is such a sweet picture of his love, because it's a partnership, right? Like we're co-laborers with Christ. And so it's this idea that love supports, it lifts the load. And I just think that sometimes in relationships, we can feel responsible for fixing people or solving their problems. And whether we've got a friend who's going through it or a kid that's going through something, whatever it might be, we sometimes just feel this weight to want to help them, to want to be there with them to fix their problems. But that is not what God wants for us. That's not what we're talking about here. He doesn't want us taking on heavy weight that's too much for us to handle. Let me say this really clearly. Our job is not to fix people or heal them or solve their problems. Our job is to love people, to be with them in the process, and then lead them to Jesus, who can do the healing, who can do the fixing, and who can solve their problems. Our job as believers is to bridge the gap between our God and a hurting world. So when we're talking about not giving up, I just want to take a minute and clarify something here, because you may be listening and thinking, well, what if I'm in a toxic relationship or an abusive relationship? In those situations, you absolutely need to prioritize your wellness and your safety. It's not considered giving up on someone or failing if you need to step back or separate from someone for a season or permanently. Boundaries are good. Boundaries are healthy. It's okay. I mean, Jesus, again, doesn't want us to be carrying weight that's too heavy for us. It's not our responsibility to be the person who is carrying someone through their problems and taking on the full weight of that. No. So, if you have a friend or you know someone who's going through something really heavy or showing behaviors that are affecting you in an unsafe or negative way, please use wisdom. Please know when it's time to take a step back or release them for a season, okay? It doesn't mean you don't care about them. It doesn't mean you failed. It doesn't mean you're giving up on them. Ultimately, you're not responsible for anybody else's process. Honestly, please hear me say that. At some point, people just have to take responsibility for their own actions and get the help that they need because, again, not our job to carry that weight. Remember, our job is not to do the healing, it's to get people to the healer. So, all of that to say, today we're focusing on what it means to cover and protect and to carry others with a resolve to not give up. I think, honestly, the first thing that came to mind is something that's a pretty good example of this, and it's the divorce rate, because I'm sure you've heard that. Honestly, this statistic may be even more by now because I feel like everybody's been saying this for a long time, but 50% of marriages end in divorce. And again, this is something that's the same across the board. Believers, unbelievers, inside the church, outside the church, just across the board, half of our marriages are failing. And that's not even including the marriages that are struggling, that are still together, right? Like that there's a reason this is happening. And what I want to emphasize is that there are people out there who are choosing to make vows to another person and commit their lives to them. And then when things get hard or they aren't feeling it anymore, they just choose to end things and find somebody else or just move on, you know? And obviously there are tons of reasons people get divorced. I'm not trying to like take this lightly, you know what I mean? But what I'm trying to say is that we're kind of infected with this idea of everything should be easy. Like this mentality of do what makes you happy is so prevalent in America, at least, you know? And so there's so much emphasis on this that as soon as we're unhappy, we think something is wrong and we need to do something else. Like it's our out, right? And we can see this because, I mean, have y'all noticed since COVID, nobody wants to work? There's just so much emphasis on I'm going to do my path, my way. I'm going to do what makes me happy. And people are not as committed as they used to be. We're not taking things as seriously as we used to as far as work, relationships, commitments to ourselves, you know, like disciplines for the things that matter in life. And I think that's honestly why we're so confused about what it means to persevere and to wait and to work for the things that are worth it. And I mean, I'm sure you know by now, life is not easy. You're not always going to wake up every day feeling 100% and perfectly happy and everything's great in your life. There are hard seasons, and unfortunately, that's just part of what it means to be a human. But we are called to love, and to love means to not give up. I think about purpose for another example. Everyone is chasing meaning in life, right? Some people look for it in money or status or possessions or the amount of followers or, you know, tons and tons of things. But as believers, we know that we have one common purpose in Christ, which is to know him and to make him known. Now, however that plays out for you, whether you are a teacher, a preacher, a podcaster, a stay-at-home mom, like whatever path you choose to live that out, we still have the common purpose of getting people to Jesus, like leading people, pointing to him, reflecting him through our lives, right? But we all still go through challenging seasons and we all go through things that sometimes would be more convenient to just quit or to give up on. But loving the Lord means not giving up on him or his plans for our lives. It's staying committed to him, staying committed to the process because we love him and we trust him and we believe that it is worth it. And the same is true of relationships. That's what I'm trying to get at today. You know, I'll be really honest. My husband, Christopher, and I, and we're pretty open about sharing this at this point in our marriage, but we've had some really hard years. We've struggled a lot in marriage. And like I said, we're pretty open about the fact that we have gone to marriage counseling. We have worked with mentors. Like we've done a lot of work in our marriage, and we've had some really challenging times through, health issues, finances, communication stuff, just like going through my healing journey. Like we've processed a lot in these first 5.5 years of marriage. But at the end of the day, what has saved our marriage is our decision to stay committed to each other. Because I'll be honest, there were so many days where either one of us could have easily been like, this would be so much easier just to quit. Like, this would be so much more convenient just to not work on it and just keep doing our own thing, or, staying together, like for the sake of this and that. Like, it's easy to do that, right? To go through the motions. There are so many marriages or relationships where people are functioning as roommates, and they have just given up on the intention of fighting for your marriage and being consistent about continuing to pursue each other, all of those things. But love holds on, right? Like, getting back to that original definition about how love covers, love doesn't air out people's dirty laundry, okay? Love isn't out here like complaining about people or gossiping about people and just venting out all of your frustrations, right? Like, there's a time and place to process with like a mentor or a trusted person, and or like a counselor, you know what I mean? But when we choose to cover the people that we love, it's to protect them. Have you heard people say how dangerous it is to share your offenses with people who are close to you? Because think about this, okay? Have you ever had a friend that was just driving you crazy, or you had some conflict and you decided to share it with like your mom or your sister or somebody, and then things work out between you, but now the person you shared with is like, I don't like them, or no, like they have a skewed perspective of them now because you've shared your negative feelings and frustrations with them, right? And so nobody wants that. Like, that's not good. We don't want to be giving other people negative opinions about people that we're in relationship with. Like, that's not healthy. It's not healthy for friendships. It's not healthy for marriages. I don't want to be out here sharing things about my son or my husband, because I want to protect them and cover them, because love assumes the best in people. Love lifts people up. And when we start complaining and sharing our offenses, it really gets in the way of that. Like, it just starts like this little trickle effect of letting in toxic things that start taking root. And it's just really hard to come back from that sometimes. So let's just avoid that. If you're in a relationship that's hard, or feeling like it would be easier to give up, or you are just frustrated, or if you feel like it would just be easy to quit on the things that you feel God is calling you to because it's just hard, or it's not working out, or you're not seeing the results as quickly as you wanted to, let me just first of all say I understand and I've been there and I'm with you on that. But I just want to encourage you, remember, it's not up to you. It's not about you. You're not alone in the process. The cool thing is we have a God who literally never gives up on us. He perseveres through everything because he loves us and he is committed to us fully. And so that's what he wants for us, is to commit to him, commit to the process in loving him, and then do the same with people. Because again, our job isn't to figure it all out. Our job isn't to be responsible for fixing or healing people. Our job is to hold onto the truth and keep coming back to Jesus, and to point other people to him as well. So that's kind of what my thoughts were this time around when I was thinking about, okay, what does it mean really to not give up, and why is that important? So hopefully that was encouraging to you today, because let me just be so vulnerable and transparent with you. There are many things in my life where I have felt so tempted to give up because I wasn't seeing the results, or it just got hard and I wanted to quit. I can say now from experience, like this podcast, for example, there were so many times where I was like, this is so much work. It's not like I'm making money really from this, but I will say, did y'all see on Instagram a few weeks ago, I shared that I had a goal this year of monetizing the podcast. And I did that. Like I randomly got one ad, the Spotify ad that you've probably heard if you're listening to these episodes, but it was just crazy. Like tiny little things like that. It's small. Like I'm talking dollars and cents at this point, but still, like there were so many times last year where I was struggling and I was just going through stuff, right? And I did take a break from the podcast, but I've been so tempted to quit at times because I'm like, oh, does anybody care? Is anybody listening? Is this even going to grow? Is this going to go anywhere? Does anybody care at all? Is this worth my time and energy and all the effort I'm putting into it? And then I'm I just see little moments, little glimpses and reminders of, yes, this is why I do what I do. Every time I get a message from somebody who says, wow, I'm so grateful that you talked about that topic today, or I'm so thankful that you were willing to share your story because I'm going through this too. Or, you just never know who it who's on the other side of your obedience and your willingness to commit to the process, because your obedience and willingness to persevere could honestly be the answer to somebody's prayer. And I think it's so easy to forget that, right? Because we're so like, oh, okay, I'm doing this thing that I feel called to do, or I'm loving this person, but I'm not seeing the breakthrough. Like, is it worth it? And I just want to tell you, it's always worth it. I think for me, at least, I have had to learn to disconnect the results from my willingness to just say yes. Because if we start saying yes to things based on like whether or not we'll get what we want out of it, we really miss the point. Like in relationships, if our goal is to fix someone, to change someone, we're probably going to be disappointed, right? Because at the end of the day, we can't change people. We can love people, and love is what changes people, right? We've already talked about that, how God's love, his kindness is what leads to repentance. It's the same in relationships for us. Like what's really going to be impactful for people and lead to real lasting change is consistent, steady love that doesn't give up, that perseveres. Like it's easy to love people when it's easy, right? But when it gets tough, when it gets hard, when your calling gets hard, are you willing to commit to the process? Are you willing to say yes and just to stay in it a little bit longer and wait? Because honestly, there are so many times when I forget that these people in the Bible, these amazing stories we hear about, like Moses or Joseph or David, it's like, oh my gosh, God called them to these incredible things. And like, look at their story, look at the lives they lived, the purpose that they lived. But we forget that Joseph was in prison for a really long time before he ever was where God was calling him to be, like before his dreams were ever fulfilled, right? And David was a kid when he was anointed as king. But right after he got that call, he went right back out to the field with the sheep. And it was, again, years before that was fulfilled. And he went through so many hardships. Jesus, even like our God, our Savior, he he had a whole hidden season from the time he was what, 12 at the temple to the time he was 30 getting baptized by John, and then had 3 years of ministry before he completed his call at the cross. Right? Like we forget that. We forget that everybody has in between seasons, messy middles, hidden seasons. And this is not even something I plan to include, but let me just say this. If you feel hidden right now in a season where you're just like, Lord, I feel called to this. I feel committed to this relationship. I feel like this is what you're asking me to do, like what my purpose is, but I don't see it. I don't feel like anybody sees it in me. I feel so overlooked. I feel so tired. I feel so like I'm not seeing the results. I'm not seeing the change. I'm not seeing the breakthrough yet. Hold on, because hidden seasons, I used to think those seasons of hiddenness and waiting, or, the persevering, I used to think that it was because God didn't trust me, or because I wasn't ready yet, or because, like people didn't see in me what I felt like God saw in me or was calling me to, or these big dreams that I had, right? Like when I was 19 and I was like, I'm going to write a book. I can't tell you how many times people looked at me and were like, okay, good for you. Like that's a cute little thing. But like I've walked through so many seasons of feeling overlooked and hidden. And I just want to tell you, if you feel that, it's not because God is holding out on you. It's not because he doesn't trust you. It's not because he doesn't think that you have it in you. Hidden seasons and waiting seasons are preparation. It's on it. I heard someone tell me this when I was struggling in a season like this. And when I was in college, they were like, man, hiddenness is not because God thinks you're not ready or doesn't like trust you, or, like it's not like he's withholding things from you. Actually, hidden seasons are when God's pulling you really close to him because he just loves you and he wants to prepare you. He wants to make sure you know the truth about who he is and who you are, how loved you are, how capable you are, building a strong foundation. Okay, let's think about this. Like root work is what I used to think of this as when I was in college and I was going through all these seasons and I was like, Lord, I want to do all these things that you're calling me to, but I feel like I'm going nowhere. And I would constantly see this picture of like a tree or a plant. And, there's a lot of work that happens beneath the surface first before we ever see the tree, before we ever see the flowers blooming, before we ever see the fruit, right? It's the root work, but it has to happen. Like the seed has to break open so that it can grow its roots down and be rooted, right? So that when we have the growth on top of the ground that we can actually see and is visible to the world around us, it actually has an anchor and something sturdy to hold on to. Because think about it, if we have a tree or a plant or a beautiful flower, it's so impressive, right? Like, oh my goodness, look at that. And obviously I'm using this as an illustration, right, for our lives and our purpose or our dreams. But if you have that tree, that flower, that plant with a really weak root system, as soon as it starts to rain, as soon as there's wind, as soon as there's storms or any kind of discomfort, it's not going to have what it needs to stay sturdy and stay grounded and stand firm through that, right? And God doesn't want that for us. And I think that's what the sweetness of the hidden seasons and the waiting seasons are all about. Whether it's in a relationship with somebody that you're just like, oh, this is so hard, I'd rather just give up. Or if you're in a season where you're just like, Lord, I feel like this is what you're calling me to. Why is it not happening? He is not holding out on you. He's actually protecting you. Remember, we're talking about love protects. He wants you close because he wants to make sure that you're grounded and ready to withstand and sustain everything he's called you to, right? Like if you feel the Lord has given you big dreams, he's going to do everything he can to make sure you're ready to hold that. Like he's not going to put you on the battlefield before you're ready or without armor, right? Like he cares about you so much that the waiting seasons our preparation time to make sure we have everything we need in place, to make sure we've got the roots to hold us sturdy so that when it's time to go, there's nothing holding us back. We've got all the tools we need. We've got the security in our God and our identity, who he says we are. And we can show up to the challenge ready to go and stay committed to the process, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in your calling, your job, your finances, your kids, like whatever it is. Love does not give up. And I know this kind of got all over the place. I really didn't mean to, I didn't intend on sharing that last part, but it just came to me and I was like, you know what? Maybe somebody needs to hear this. And honestly, it was a good reminder for me too. Just because God he's never given up on me and he's never given up on you. And the fact that we get to be that for other people, like, can you imagine? Can you imagine a world of hurting people who got that kind of love? That would change everything. So that's all I've got for you today, friends. I hope that this was encouraging. Hopefully you got something out of it. I feel like I say this every week. I'm kind of, like I just sit here, mic, and talking to my computer screen and you never know what's going to come out. But hey, I hope that you enjoyed this one. I love you guys. And I will talk to you next week. Next Monday, we'll be here for week 11. I can't believe we're almost done, but I hope you're enjoying it. If you don't have a book or if you want to grab one for a friend to go through the study together or with a group, check out the link below. I'll make sure it's listed in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it for today. And I'll see you right here next week. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to tune into another episode of the Byword Show. I love having you here and I'm so thankful for your support. Don't forget to share a screenshot of this episode to let me know you were here. I can't wait to talk again soon, but in the meantime, be sure to come hang out with me on Instagram and remember, I am cheering you on.